Good evening, friends. Welcome to Knox Makers. I'm Isaac. This is Tuesday, and as our tradition goes, we are here tonight to do what we call show and share. We got some folks who've brought in projects that they've been working on, maybe successful, maybe unsuccessful, but they're going to be interesting either way. We've got several to look at this evening, I'm happy to report. First of all, Ronan is going to share with us lion's mane mushrooms.
All right. How close do I have to be? Can you guys hear me?
Project.
All right.
Into the microphone.
Try to see that here. That is a picture of a lion's mane mushroom that I grew. And it's kind of a laborious process. With plants, you put a seed in some dirt. But I got these with, you start with liquid culture syringes where it's mycelium suspended in sugar water. And you have to take the syringe and plunge it into a sterilized jar of usually grain. I use oats because they're inexpensive. I have this little lab that I work in. You guys can see that. That is a still air box, because if any air gets into the jars, then they'll contaminate from the germs that are just in the air. But you have to put the syringe in there, and it'll start to colonize. And I have jars here. If you want to pass these around. There's a little mushroom growing in this one here.
So in this one, will you have to add air before it will grow, or will it grow in this one?
Yeah, so that is, I put liquid culture in that one, and the mycelium slowly grows, and it kind of looks like a spider web, and slowly it'll take over all the oats. And you let it get about a third, and then you shake it to break it all up, and it'll grow again until the jar is completely covered. Then I put that into a bag of sawdust. You can see, it doesn't pick up my phone screen well, but it's just a bag of sawdust. And then it'll colonize that after about a month. That doesn't like that. But then at the end, you get several pounds of mushrooms coming off of this sawdust. And it will eventually run out of nutrients in the sawdust and die. So, the end.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Ronan. Next up, we've got a share from Doc, who's going to show us his 3D resin printing experiments.
Hi, everyone. I'm Doc. I got a new 3D printer, one of the resin printers. And if anybody in here has taken my locksmith class, I talk about an Egyptian lock. This lock has been in existence for over 4,000 years. This is where the modern pin tumbler lock comes from. So I decided to print a replica of it. So when I do teach my class, I can send it around as well. And I was really impressed with the way it came out, with the exception of one mistake. On the key, you'll notice that it's got a broken peg, and they had to be glued in place individually, which seemed difficult. So I printed a second version of it, where I merged the files together so there wasn't the extra shear line to hopefully make a more sturdy key. I'm going to put it together real quick and send it around so everybody can use it. Can we see the pins at the top there? Do you see the pins here? They've got a little bit of play in it, so when you're sliding it back and forth, just be a little ginger or turn it upside down so the pins don't get in the way when you go to relock it. I have one other thing I wanted to show you that I learned from my resin printer, which is clear. As you can see, I've printed 2 unicorn skulls. They are the exact same design, but one has that yellowish tinge to it. If anybody is having problems with their resin printer of getting the yellow tinge, that is something that is a reaction from the UV light you're using to cure it. So you're going to cure it at 8 seconds per layer. And that's it. Put it in a box and let it dry naturally. And that's how you will get this versus this.
That's extremely nifty. Thank you, Doc. Next up, we've got a share from Caleb, who's brought some leather work to share with us.
Hello, hello. I've been missing for a little bit, and this is what I've been working on. I started with an idea. Is this the... This is the thing, okay. I've been started with an idea. I was curious to see if candle wax would add the smell to the leatherwork, and I found out a lot about it, right? So if you let the candle wax sit for a little bit, you get this ugly color, but you can put dyes and stuff on it. The issue with the odor is you got to let it sit for maybe 2 or 3 days before the dye odor goes away, so you can get the candle wax on it. It looks kind of rad, but it is pretty cool. It has a smell of birchwood. And that's the design that I started with, and slowly got stuff like this to this, and now we're here.
That looks really fine. Thank you. Next up, we've got Joe, who's brought quilts and mushrooms. It is mushroom night.
Kind of funny, we had somebody else that was doing mushrooms. So, anyway, my wife and I retired this year, and she's big time into quilting. And in the last few months, she's done 14 quilts. Her quilting group has done over 100 that went to Children's Hospital. And this is one she did for us for a Christmas quilt. I'll pass this one around. You know, her folks, when she was growing up, had a needle craft shop, and she sews anything and everything. So, but this one here, she did a couple months ago. 2 years ago, she was going to treatment for breast cancer, and during her 2 years ago, she was going through treatment for breast cancer, and while she was having her chemo sessions, she was quilting quilt blocks together, and those particular blocks were all from fabric that was from her sister, her mom and dad, and her brothers when they were growing up. And I'll pass this around. Now, on the mushrooms, I didn't know anybody else in the group was doing that. A month or two ago, I brought some jars in that I had done some spawn, and this is some of the results I've been getting. This is some pink oyster mushrooms, and I got a liquid culture, used some grain to inoculate it with the culture, and once it was taken over by the mycelium, I transplanted it to these buckets, and I've been playing around with different growing mediums, either wood pellets or that's used for wood stoves. Put them in hot water to sterilize them. Once they cool down, add the grain spawn to it, and then it'll take over the medium and then start producing. Oyster mushrooms is another one I've been doing, and I've had the best results from that. And there's one bucket, and then it decided it wanted to come out the top of the bucket too, so you can see how well it populated the top. And then this was some that I'd harvested off the side of the bucket. But they grow surprisingly fast, and you know, once they start showing the fruiting, let me find one of the pictures here. These little holes here, you'll start seeing little clusters show up, and then you know, one day you'll see just a bunch of little pinheads, and the next day it's like this big around, and the next day it's like this, and the next day it's like this. It's amazing how fast they can grow. The issue I've got is where I'm growing them at. I don't have the right humidity, because I got gas heat in the house and it dries the air out. So I bought one of these little greenhouse stands. It's about this wide by this deep by this high. It's got plastic over it, and I bought an ultrasonic humidifier. So I'm going to get that in there and then start, probably after the first of the year, start going more into detail on it. But I've been growing oyster mushrooms, the pink oyster mushrooms. I just got some new culture for what they call king oysters, which they get really big. And I've also the enoki mushrooms, which are the little white ones that you see in the store, usually used for Oriental foods and stuff. So just playing around with stuff. So it's the benefit of being retired, you can experiment with things. So okay.
It's very interesting. Thank you. I feel like that y'all should set up like a time-lapse camera on these. That would be really fun to look at. Next up, we've got David, who has brought a phone stand to show us tonight.
Hello. So the question came up, what can I do with scrap wood? Well, if part of what you've got is a dowel, you've got almost any kind of angle you want. You can kind of eventually get the angle that you need. Seems to work. And I more or less just sort of engineered it as I went. I knew I was going to need two planes, figure out some way to put them together so that it would stay put. I actually nailed this one and glued it. This one's only glue. None of it's forever. Of course, the requisite. You sign and date everything you make. You never know what's going to last. And my wife says at the last minute, as I was headed out the door, this white space needs something. And so 74 cents later, she prints this little design thing out on her vinyl printer, which is, that thing's cool. It's probably the best thing I ever gave her. So this doesn't like bring a lot of like really new stuff to the table, but look at all the scratch stuff that I'm not burning in the backyard now. And it's already been suggested that, you know, if I'd put a notch in the front, I'd have room for the phone cable to go. So there's that. Everything considered, I'm pretty pleased with it. Hooray.
All right, thank you. Next up, we've got Timothy, who has brought a firewood rack to show us.
Thanks, Isaac. Drop that there for, let's see, plus. So I had an old metal railing on a deck. There's the skeleton left over from it. That I replaced the railing back middle of the year, and I had all this old metal. It's all kind of metal posts and spindles. So I decided to replace all that with some wood and wire railings that are better. But I had all this stuff laying around and decided I could do something with it, and took advantage of the tools and the expertise here at Knox Makers, and learned how to weld. And ended up with some racks that I'm still working on piece by piece. I won't hand that around for the things. But the story here is really not about a fancy wood rack or a firewood rack. The story really is about the community at Knox Makers. We had Dee Dee and Joe Hall especially were really helpful in teaching the welding, the MIG 101 class, and then Joe especially made time for a couple of afternoons to come over and just kind of sit with me and make sure, hold my hand as it were, and make sure I was doing everything correctly and had all the things plugged in right. So this is working. This is a third of these. I've got enough metal from the railings to do another 3, and I'll set them up in my carport. They're not pretty. They're getting better as I go. The first welds were very ugly, and I think I've got a few here just to show off how bad my welds are. Yeah, I do a lot of things. Here we go. So some of these are, just really kind of ugly welds that some of them break, and you learn as you go. And but like I said, it's about the community, people who are here to help you out and give you constructive criticism and tips on how to do things better. So I'll leave this up on the side if anyone wants to come check it out. Like I said, it's not much to look at, but I built it myself with help. Thank you.
Something that was explained to me last time I started showed off a welding project is it's not mistakes or ugly welds, it's aesthetic choices.
Oh, there's no choice involved here.
Don't tell people that, it's intentional.
I appreciate you sharing that story. I think the generosity of spirit and community mindedness here is definitely the secret sauce, and it makes this a really special place. Next up, we've got Subir, who has brought various laser etched things to share.
Hello. I took a laser cutting class some time ago, and I learned, among other things, how to etch on plywood, and I have not stopped since. So this is these are, it's visible, right? So these are symbols from a book series that I really like called The Stromlight Archive. I know at least one person who's read it. So, yeah. So now that I know how to make coasters like this, this is easier to pass around. Not pass around the other things. I'll be making more of those as Christmas gifts for my friends. Another thing was this 2.5-hour monstrosity. Here. Yeah. This took 2.5 hours mainly because these symbols here I cross-hatched them with the laser that I didn't really need to, because these were only single hatched and they look more or less the same. It didn't really matter, but I ended up having to wait. It could have cut down on time, but I just ended up having to sit there near the laser for 2.5 hours. And this last thing lastly, that's my family name. So really, before I came to Knox Makers, when I heard about Knox Makers and I heard about laser cutting, or just in general, the first thing that came to mind was I wanted to make a sign with my family name on it, because back home in my home state in India, there are no the houses are not numbered with addresses. Now they are, but before, like back 20, 50 years ago, they had house names. So any mail that came in had to be identified by the house name. And my family's house name was this. Is that, not really bright at all. So points to anyone who can actually pronounce that. Chadratundil. Chadratundil. We can go over lessons if you wanted to, if you want to learn how to pronounce it. But yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is everyone who signed up. Did anyone else bring something they'd like to show that didn't make it on the list today? No? Okay. Well, we had a really lovely show this evening. I appreciate everybody bringing this stuff in. Just as a reminder, we like to see finished projects, but if you're working on a project that's not finished and maybe never will be finished, that's also a good show. If you've started something and it failed miserably, we're interested. Help us not make that mistake too. We love to see everything you've been up to. It's super fun. Yeah, let's do it. Sure. All right.
Okay, so a few weeks ago I showed off a couple pens that I had made. I've got another one that I'm working on now that I'm experimenting with a little bit. So I wanted to show this. This is the top piece of the pen that I'm working on making. How do I make this toward? Yay, okay. So this is the top barrel of the pen. It's cocobolo wood. I've got some brass inserts that I turned, and an acrylic block that's glued up in the middle. That it's not quite ready yet, work in progress, but I'm mostly happy with it so far. So that's it, and there's a matching bottom piece too that they're both going to roll away now. But yeah, that's where we're at with that. That's it.
Very pretty bonus share. We've got quite a number of classes coming up. I hope everybody's keeping an eye on the calendar. We've got on the 9th, which is Thursday, the acrylic holiday ornaments class, which is Tracy's Jam. That's happening at 6:30. Still got tickets left or no? Yep. Still have tickets left, so you should sign up for that and come make an ornament with me. On Saturday, which is the 11th, looks like at 10 a.m. we've got Laser Cutter 101. Remember, you got to have the Laser Cutter 101 also with Tracy. If you want to use the laser cutter and cut endless coasters and family names. And then at 1, we've got wood-turned Christmas ornaments. And then at 4:30, we've got the horseshoe reindeer class. All that is happening on Saturday. And then on Sunday at 2 p.m., we've got the Mad Engineer's Haphazard Guide to Circuit Bending, which is, of course, James. And that is going to be amazing, I can only imagine. Next Wednesday, which is the 15th, we'll be doing a new member onboarding at 7 p.m. If you are a new member at Knox Makers, if you're a probationary member, or if you've never been to a new member onboarding, we would love to see you there. That is 7 to 8:30, and there will be donuts. And then on Sunday, which is the 19th, and that will be our monthly virtual board meeting. That happens across the internet, so not here, but we'll be posting a link to that in the All Members channel, and everyone is welcome to attend should they wish. And then let me remind you that next Tuesday, the 21st, or the following one rather, we've got the Mutant Toy Parade after show and share. So all the goofy electronic instruments that people have made, we're going to go to the old city and march around and make people look at them and listen to them. So that should be really rather wild. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you, Billy, for waving to me in this fashion. What do you want?
17th is a class for the etching. It's not on there yet.
Well, if it's not on the calendar. The 17th, that is the etching of the thermos, is that right?
Yeah, Friday.
Okay, so that's going to be on the schedule imminently. So if you would like to etch a thermos, keep an eye out for that. That is coming up on the 17th. And now let us go out in the workshop and make a mess and make some noise and hang out with each other. Thanks everyone for being with us tonight.
I got also if I can share.
Excuse me?
Can I share something?
Sure.
I'm a newbie.
Welcome.
I have no problem being loud and obnoxious. All right. I'm Al Bayless. I just joined, which is right side up on this thing. I guess that is. Oops. Where'd it go? Come on, back here. Not that. Come back here. God, I can't do anything right. Come back here. There it is. So I'm mainly carpenter, amateur woodworker. So I bought a house in Tennessee, February coming up, it'll be 2 years. And I live on a ridge, and we have no flat land, and I got no yard to mow. So my wife put in a rose garden, and she said, I need someplace to sit to enjoy my roses. Problem, I'm an engineer, got to solve a problem. Here's my solution. A little deck, flat. She can put her new chair out there with her little umbrella, enjoy the roses. So, you know, it's got structure under it. Over-engineered, it'll be there 100 years. Goes this way. And there's a well there. So it's got posts and, lots of trees up there. So simple solution to a problem. I like building stuff like this. There's our knot garden. I built that too for her peppers and her tomatoes. And there's her roses that she's planted on the hill. That's pretty much it.
I want to sit in that hammock and read a book. So you know when you say goodbye to somebody and then you get on the elevator together and it's all awkward? Go to the workshop. Let's go do stuff.